I've been working on building my own startup for the last 8 months, and I genuinely thought it would be way easier than it is. It's been one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do, not only mentally, but like physically too. I remember listening to like Alex Hormozy and some other podcasts, and all of them said the same thing. That's like, it's one of the hardest things that you can possibly do.
It just comes down to this absolute soul-crushing uncertainty with the idea that no one can actually tell you, and you have this unquenched desire to be able to predict the future while at the same time knowing that you can't.
But for some reason, it never really clicked to me. Now, in this video, I want to paint a picture of what it's like to try to build your own company, with the goal of providing more awareness or maybe preparedness if you were to try something like this yourself. Because no matter how hard it is, I still think it's one of the best things I've ever done. But before we start, I want to kind of acknowledge that this is a very lucky place where I'm in. I am a first-generation immigrant and moved to the United States when I was 5 years old, and went from like sleeping on the floor during the first year, not being able to afford food, and my parents eventually grinded and got us into a nice middle-class house in the suburbs. Then since like 14, I've been working nonstop, enough to get into a cheap university where I graduated with a computer engineering degree. Then I had a few jobs in computer engineering, then developer relations, and eventually I quit to try to build this business full-time. Now, I worked really hard to get here, but I also have to give my parents a ton of credit. Like, you don't get opportunities like this in Lithuania, which is where I came from. And without them, I would be, I don't know where I would be, honestly. But I'm very grateful that I'm here, and I recognize how lucky I am. But also, at the same time, the pain that I'm talking about here is very real, even though it is an amazing pain to have. I'm not really sure where to start, but I would say probably with the physical pain. When I left my job, I was 28 years old, and that's when I decided to go full-time on this startup. Before then, I've never had any chronic pain of like any sort other than injuries, but in the second month of me going full-time, my back started hurting. Now, I've always taken health very seriously. I have a standing desk for the last few years, make sure to take like a lot of breaks, I go for walks during the day, and I've been consistently working out most of my life. But this back pain would not go away like no matter what I did for 2 months. At first, I thought maybe I'm slacking with my workouts because I did go down to like 2 workouts a week because, I had to work instead of like the usual 4. So I ramped that back up. I even started doing yoga. But then another month went by and nothing changed. So then I have like this kind of old desk chair that I thought was still good, but I'm thinking maybe my chair is failing me now. So I decided to buy a Herman Miller Aeron, which is known as one of the healthiest chairs on the market. And after that, it felt like it got worse. So now I'm like 2.5 months into my chronic back pain, and I'm doing everything to try to fix it. While also, working all day long because, I'm trying to make some money. Now at this point, I would have been to the doctor, but I also live in the US where your healthcare is tied to your employer. And since I quit my job, I didn't have an employer. Just a little side note, the fact that we call the US the greatest country in the world, while it's the only first world country without healthcare for everybody, is ridiculous. But anyways, I pay like $350 a month for insurance, so I have something, but it doesn't cover anything except like the worst case scenario. And my out-of-pocket is like $21,000. So if something really bad happens where I have to spend $21,000, that's like the max I would have to spend. But like even knowing that, I was ready to pay out-of-pocket because the pain was just terrible to live with. And then I saw this random tweet. It's a book called Healing Back Pain. Now I didn't expect much from this book, but as soon as I finished, the pain went away within a week. And the funny part is this book's like not good. It's not a really good book. It's a pretty shitty book. And it reads like kind of like a straight snake oil salesman. I didn't really like reading it at all, but it worked. I looked into it a little bit, and it's one of the first books about the mind-body connection, which is gaining a lot of steam in the science community lately. The idea of this book is that back pain is almost always a mental problem, and the most common example of this is stress causing lower back pain. Now, I actually didn't see myself as stressed because I was working on a cool project with a cool friend, and my day-to-day was really fun, but this book caused me to step back and reflect a little bit. I've been having more stupid fights with my wife, and she mentioned a few times that I've been a lot more quieter since I went full-time. Along with this and a few other symptoms like gaining weight, not seeing friends as much, I kind of almost self-diagnosed myself that maybe I do have stress. Mine is more of a long-term stress, not the regular stress you see in movies of like the day-to-day sweating and pacing around type of stress. Now, I still haven't had time to go down this whole mind-body connection rabbit hole, so if you know more about this and I'm potentially wrong, I'd love to hear in the comments, because I'm not exactly sure what happened. I didn't end up changing much with my routine, but my sense is that awareness of the problem, that it could be a mental problem, and not necessarily a physical problem in my back, was the key difference that helped the pain go away. Now, this pain still comes back from time to time, but when it does, my first thing I try is to try to reduce my stress instead of worrying about having like a herniated disc or something. So now my next step was, how do I reduce the stress? And what am I even stressing about if I'm having a lot of fun on a day-to-day basis? I've had a lot of time to think about this because, it just was affecting my life so much. And there are probably many parts to it, but there is one part that I think people don't talk enough about. And I think it's one of the main stress points of working for yourself versus working for somebody else. I think a lot of entrepreneurial stress comes from not knowing if what you are doing is the correct thing that you should be doing. When you are at a job, the correct thing you should be doing is what your boss tells you that you should be doing. You kind of put your trust in him, that he knows what is right for the company or whatever section of the company he's working with. And you just trust that whatever he's telling you to do is the right thing to be doing. Now, the other cases, you just don't really care. You just do whatever he says, but you should care a little bit. That's where you spend 8 hours every day. Now, you still have a little stress given the narrow scope that your boss has given you of what you should be working on, and start to make decisions around there. If you're a developer, you should think about whether you need a while loop or a for loop, like an if statement or a switch case. But once you have a little experience in it, it becomes easier and easier. Now, your boss has a little bit more stress on him because he has to know what the right thing to do on a bigger scope than you. But still, his scope is set by his boss, so he has some constraints. I want to walk through an example of this because I feel like a lot of people don't recognize the scope of the decision making and how hard it actually is. So if you're a developer, your boss might want you to make an app art for an application. You have the decisions that you need to make within the technical scope of what it means to make that happen. Now, your boss's boss told your boss that he needs to make the app easier to navigate. So now your boss has the responsibility of figuring out what are the different ways that we can make this app easier to navigate. What's the best option for this specific app? What will give the best user experience of the application? How do we verify that this is the best option? And who on the team should implement this? There are probably hundreds of decisions that need to be made from that point at which the app needs to be easier to navigate. Your boss has a massive increase in scope from you because you just have to figure out how to make the app art. He has to figure out, should we even make an app art? And he has the burden on his shoulders of whether he's doing the correct thing to help this company succeed. But this decision tree is exponential, right? You think about your boss's boss's boss. Now, his goal was to make the app more fluid, and he had to go through weeks of figuring out all the thousands of possible things that could be done in order to do this, which led him to think about that navigation is the thing that should be sorted. Now, you can go all the way up the organization tree until you get to the very top, which is usually the CEO. Now, the CEO job is crazy. His job is to basically choose out of everything ever possible to do in a company what will bring the best results for the company. Now, some CEOs have a lot of experience doing this. Elon's built 15 companies. I'm sure he has a better understanding than I do of what it takes to build a successful business. Or maybe there's other people that work their way up the corporate ladder, right? You've gone from developer to developer's boss, so you have a bigger scope, then his boss, an even bigger scope, all the way until you're CEO, where you have practice in each part of the scope, and you broaden it as you go on. But most entrepreneurs, however, don't go that route. We kind of jump in from an early stage and figure out what to do. Our job goes from what color should I make this app art to out of everything possible to ever do in a company, what is the correct next step? This, I believe, is where the root of most stress is. It's such a massive weight that you have to carry around every day, many times a day. An entrepreneur gets even worse because you usually don't have a bunch of team members around you. You're usually either starting by yourself, maybe with a few other people. So you have the CEO's burden, we also have the marketer's burden, you have the boss's burden, you have the developer's burden, you have all the burdens of all the decision making that you have to make. As an entrepreneur, you're still trying to make the thing, so making the correct decision is even more important. Now, it's kind of almost an impossible task, but it's also something that gets easier the more experience that you have. Now, I'm still very early in my journey, but these past 8 months have been an incredible amount of learning. I want to share some of the biggest things that I've learned so far during this short period, and I know I still have a lot to go, so any tips in the comments would be appreciated. So when it comes to decision making, code is easy to know when it is right or wrong. The logic either works or it doesn't. But most topics related to building a business are not that straightforward. For example, product vision, design, pricing, and I could keep going on. You only know if they were the correct decision after they were implemented and used for a while. And even then, you don't really know if it was the most correct decision. Now, the first step to kind of alleviate some of this burden is analytics. Analytics help you have a way to test and check whether your decisions are correct. Because for things that aren't code, there's no right or wrong. But with analytics, you can figure out if one thing's more right or more wrong than the other thing. If you make a change and you see that more people are visiting your site, you're probably on the right track. And even more directly, there's this thing called A/B testing, which is massive for checking whether you're making a difference in your business. There are many different tools for A/B testing, but the idea is that 50% of your users get one version of the software, and the other 50 get a different version of software. Then you can track between these two versions which one performs better depending on whatever your goal you have. Now, A/B testing is great because they both run at the same time. So whether you have regular analytics, if you're just checking if users are going up, like something might have happened, maybe some outside conditions changed. But with A/B testing, you know exactly that this version is probably better than this if you have enough sample size. We often use this for updating our landing page and checking what leads to more sales. This kind of removes the cognitive load of having to know what a good or bad headline is and instead outsources that to testing it with analytics. Now again, there are so many decisions that need to be made every single day, and most of them are abstract topics. In order to kind of concretize them and test whether the approach you're taking is correct or not, you need to create a system and iterate on the system. A/B testing is a good example of a system. Before, you would just kind of write it, you ship it, and you just hope for the best. Now you can write it, you set up these A/B tests where it tests both versions of the software, and after some time you can decide if it was actually better or not. This is a system that hopefully your landing page will keep improving time over time. Another example of this is our weekly newsletter. Before I set up a system for it, I would sit down on Thursdays and just kind of have to think of it from I don't know where, and kind of think of something that's of value to the people that are going to be receiving this email. It took a lot of effort every time I wanted to write one. But then I created a template that I follow and use every week. It's where I cover a problem that I faced in the business and how I solved it. Now, this is a system because every week I write according to this template. So I can see how many people read it, how many people want to subscribe, and if I make changes to this template, how does it affect those numbers. Now, all this systemizing and offloading is great, but some things just cannot be systemized, and you need to just trust yourself and make the call. There's not enough time in the day to be systemizing everything because there's like tens of decisions every day. Creating a system takes a long time, and everything that needs to happen cannot be systemized either, like product vision. Oftentimes, you just have to trust yourself and make the decision that feels right. Especially early on, you'll probably be making a lot of wrong decisions. Again, like I don't have all the experience that big CEOs have, but I'm learning something every day, and hopefully the next decisions I make are more correct than the previous ones. And I know I'm already making a lot better decisions than I did 8 months ago. I still have a lot of work to do to fully trust my gut and a lot more experience to gain, but I am making progress. Now, last thing is to not take this so seriously. Even though it's very serious and it's something I want to do my whole life, it's not nearly as serious as what I had to go through when I was young or what my parents had to go through their life. Like the worst case scenario of this is that I go back to a cushy tech job, which I genuinely enjoyed, and work on Hunger Mind as a side project. This project is something I see myself working on for the rest of my life. I hope it's full-time, but if it's not, life is still pretty great. So I'm here on this journey. I'm going to try to be more myself, stop worrying so much about what might or might not happen, do my best to make the correct decisions, and lean into more of what feels right. Do it publicly so I can share the journey and hopefully others can learn from me. And there's nothing really negative that can come from just being myself and doing something I'm genuinely passionate about. And hopefully my back gets a little bit better. Now this ended as a little pep talk for myself, but I'm very confident in what we're doing and know we can succeed. But also know that we can't lose if we just have fun and be ourselves. Now, if you want to learn more about what I'm building, visit hungermind.com. Our goal is to help people build good products because doing so has been incredibly fulfilling in my life. And I want to help others do the same thing through courses and templates and kits. Hunger Mind, Hunger Mind, Hunger Mind, Hunger Mind. Hunger Mind, Hunger Mind, Hunger Mind. Hunger Mind, Hunger Mind, Hunger Mind, Hunger Mind.